First off, Aaron, thanks very much for coming on, dude, and having a good not financial. Let me restart that. Aaron, thanks for coming on, man. Super appreciate you coming on and sharing your opinion and your expertise. Obviously, you're a big player in the mortgage industry. I myself, principal broker for Viking REI, real estate investments, as well as a fiduciary financial advisor. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background and where you come from?
Thanks, Nathan. I'm really excited to be here. This is like an emergency podcast, right?
Definitely.
So, I'm a branch manager and a coach at Guild Mortgage Company. Been in the mortgage business for about 24 years now, a long time, and love to follow the market and follow everything real estate all day, every day, and have my social media page and all that good stuff where I'm constantly updating people on this stuff. So really keep an ear to the market and we're embroiled in a little bit of some hot water right now.
That's without a doubt, man. And honestly, dude, as far as your social media stuff goes, man, you put out good content. There's a very neutral stance, dude, that is very fact based. And I super appreciate that. Obviously, your content has proven itself. You've got a very good chunk of followers on Facebook. You do the dang thing. Let's just put it that way, right? So what brought us here today is the 10-year treasury, right? And obviously the 10-year treasury just absolutely shot up overnight. And I've spoken with you, I've spoken with a couple other lenders. I won't say any names or anything like that, but there's been a lender or two that actually says that, although the 10-year tracks, mortgage-backed securities on the open market, they still believe that the mortgage rates are going to come down. And again, this is just my opinion. I don't see that. So would you mind just kind of breaking down, the similarities between the 10-year and just kind of what you're saying as a mortgage professional?
Well, Nate, it's really interesting because, optimism always prevails, right? Everybody wants to be optimistic. So everybody wants mortgage rates to drop down. And look, I do
Me
too.
too. Yeah.
We all do. But you also have to be realistic. We're trying to advise people every day. And if you're sitting there waiting for rates to come down, you may be waiting a very long time. And we're not doing you any favors if we're telling you it's okay to wait.
Mhm.
Because really, you need to buy a home. You need to buy a home when you can afford to buy a home and when you're emotionally ready to buy a home, and you need to not worry about anything that Nate and I say the rest of this talk. But if you want to kind of know what's happening on the market, that's what's important to know. We're never going to tell you not to buy a house because the proof is people bought houses at 15% interest rates and made a truckload of money. They bought homes at 2.5% and made a truckload of money. Buy the home, right?
Yeah.
But as it relates to the 10-year and the 30-year mortgage note, Nate, I saw something you posted today, which is so accurate, which is that they're different instruments, but they have the same investor pool.
Yeah.
They're both long-term investment strategies,
Mhm.
right? So they mirror each other. Now, the difference in the two, the 10-year and the 30-year fixed rate mortgage or mortgage-backed securities, whatever you want to frame it, is what's called a spread.
Mhm.
And the spread is very high right now compared to historically. But it's because it's all private capital. It's all private investors. One of the historical perspectives that we all need to have is when you say I'm waiting for rates to come down, you're probably thinking I want them to come down to the 4% range that followed President Obama's administration, which was created out of the Great Recession, the mortgage meltdown, one of the worst economic periods in our history
Yeah,
is what
wild ride,
drove
man.
those.
Wild ride. That's when I first got into real estate. You were already producing, man. You were already a juggernaut, man. Like that is when I first got broken into the real estate market. I was 19 years old, and I was on-site general manager for a 32 unit townhome complex that was nothing but Section 8. I had people lighting freaking couches on fire, dude, selling drugs, dude, gangbangers and shit, man. It was a wild intro into real estate, but dude, between me and you. I would never discount that. Like I would never change that, man. That was one hell of an experience, without a doubt.
I bet I can't wait for your podcast, Nate, because you have the best stories. You have the most amazing
We,
stories.
we definitely have some wild stuff to share, dude, without a doubt.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Mortgage rates chugged along forever at 6 and 7% and higher. And when I bought my first house, it was 14%. So, a 6% interest rate was a good interest rate. To your point, I had been in the mortgage business already 8 years or so by the time the mortgage crisis had occurred. And we never saw a rate that was below 6%. We were thrilled when rates got into
Oh
the
yeah, for
low
sure.
sixes. And so, so the Great Recession happens, and the Federal Reserve goes in and to save the economy buys all the mortgage-backed securities because there was no market for mortgage-backed securities. The first time in history they did that, 2008. And so it artificially drove mortgage rates down into the threes and fours,
Mhm.
right? And the Fed stayed there until 2022. So all those rates you saw for 14 years in the threes and fours, and then the pandemic happens, right, in 2020, and they shut down the economy.
And nothing has been normal since the pandemic. Like I'm a very big data guy, right? Like I
Yep.
follow trends, do data is my best friend. But when you say a normal market, nothing has been normal since 2020. Since the pandemic happened, like you cannot count on traditional data sets. You can't
Yep.
count on, past history. They say history repeats itself, but I don't know what happened.
Doesn't.
Maybe the particle collider like put us into a different timeline or who knows what, but we are in a really weird place as far as market trends go. And that's one thing that I have to stress that, yeah, we can rely on past data. We can state our opinions, but at the end of the day, since 2020, we've been in a very irregular market, hands down.
Nate, history does repeat, except in 2020, what did we do? We shut down the world economy. We paid people to stay home. We paid businesses millions of dollars to not open their doors, right? We don't have historic perspective of that.
Trillions of dollars injected into the market,
We,
trillions.
we have no, so every bit of data that you want to count on post 2020 doesn't exist.
Mhm.
We never flooded the market like that with money.
Yeah.
So
And,
everything we're
and
going through today is new. There's no
yeah,
historical data. People will say, like, it's like the Trump tariffs, right? Oh my God, tariffs will kill the economy, blah, blah. And they may. But you can't go
yeah.
look at 1930 tariffs and compare them to 2025 tariffs. Now, I'm not a fan of tariffs, right? And I'm not being political. I'm just saying you can't use 1930 as an example in 2025 when in
Different
2020
worlds.
the world changed.
Yeah, different worlds, different worlds. And so,
Different
so
world.
speaking of that, so I actually want to rewind a little bit and I wanted to, give kudos too, and something that really, needs to be understood. You said that there's a lot of emotion when it comes to residential, and you were completely correct. I feel that there's a lot of emotion too, also with the way that money's being injected to the market. I mean, if you look at what happened with the 10-year and this recent boost, I had somebody send me something. There was billions upon billions that were injected, but the majority of it is actually from foreign interest, which is pretty crazy, to look at. So all in all, yeah, emotions are running very heavy, and there's so much. How do I say this? Opposition that's being spread, and I even see people rooting for China and like this trade war that we're in, which is just absolutely nuts. But it's happening, man. It's happening.
Well, we live in a time when everybody wants to make everything political. Like if I when I post on social media, oh, interest rates are up, interest rates are down. That's all I say. There's no political message behind that, but there'll be 400 comments, and 250 of them are going to be, well, this one's an idiot. No, that one's an idiot. No, this person did it. No, my post has nothing to do with that. Interest rates either go up or down, right?
It just stating data and facts, man. Totally get
Yes,
it.
I mean,
I
some of it's policy driven, but it's not all policy driven. And so, so let's cut to today, right? So, like you said, the 10-year Treasury had its biggest one-day jump. Nate, now normally the Treasury yield, 10-year, 30-year, the longer term ones, they don't move a lot, right? They
Yeah.
barely move. They go up and down a little bit every single day. But in one day last week or the other day, they jumped up the highest single day gain since 2001. Okay. That was the 10-year Treasury. The 30-year Treasury had its biggest single day jump in 43 years. 43 years. I
Insane.
mean, it's insane. It's unusual. So, to your point, what happens is we have the 30-year mortgage rate, long-term mortgage rates, right? Long-term bonds, they're similar. So mortgage rates went up too, which was strange. And why it's freaking people out is because what we look for in mortgage rates, as I just said, the lowest mortgage rates in history were caused by very, very bad economic news, right? Bad economic news drives mortgage rates down. Good economic news drives them up. The reason for that is that investors move into bonds traditionally when things are more sketchy.
Hmm.
right? They move into bonds. And so as a result, we've seen inflation is now down at a 4-year low. Well, as inflation comes down, mortgage rates should come down, right? But it didn't. Mortgage rates went the other day, and it went the other way. And the reason for it is we just have so much uncertainty. If you are so the people that own bonds or that normally invest in bonds, to your point, a lot of foreign governments are selling the bonds. They're not buying the bonds, right? And so when something doesn't, when you so when you need somebody to invest in something, right? What do you and they're not investing with you? What do you got to do? You got to offer them about a return, right? If
Exactly.
I was going to
Right.
ask you, if I wanted you to invest in my business, and I said, Nate, it's $1,000 a share, and you're like, totally not interested. Yeah,
Well, I mean, what's the return though? That's the big question. What's the return, right?
yeah, thousand. You give me $1,000, I'm going to give you back a 10% return,
Yeah,
and you'd
yeah.
be like,
And
yeah,
here's the thing. Any investor, man, we're looking at timeline. We're looking at, what is our major goal, right? And what's the risk tolerance, right? Um,
exactly.
looking at what's just been injected to the 10-year treasury, that says something really big to me as a financial advisor, right? Obviously, people do not feel comfortable in equities, and they think that rates are going to go up. Why invest in a debt security if you think rates are going to go down? That's going to diminish the value of that security, right? So
Yeah,
that is something very big. But the big question is, obviously the majority of this was outside foreign influence, right? There's a whole
yeah.
bunch. Also, individual investors too. So that is a big statement. We don't know where it's going to go, but it's definitely something that we need to pay attention to.
For sure. Right now investors are scared. And they're uncertain, and so they're not necessarily. Normally, they'd move into the safety of bonds, but maybe bonds don't feel as safe today, right? And so, what's happening in the bond market, as we're talking about, is that so now instead of it being X amount of dollars, it has to be X plus 5%, X plus 6% to get those people to buy them, right? Well, as those numbers drive up, mortgage rates follow with them. So now we're looking at today where mortgage rates are back probably over seven. We'll probably close today back over 7%
Yeah.
on average. Now, that doesn't mean, I don't want you watching and say, oh, my mortgage lender offered me 6.625. Well, they may be able to today. I'm talking about national average rates, right? So those are coming up. And now the big question everybody wants to know is when are they coming down? Well, you tell
Million
me.
dollar question right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you tell me. Here's what it's going to take. We need bad economic news, really bad economic news.
Yeah.
Not the type of economic news that's inflation going up is not bad economic news. Okay. Bad economic news is 15% of people get laid off,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Unemployment goes to 5 or 6%. You know, country goes into recession. That's bad news,
Yeah,
right? That is bad news. So that's what it's
speaking of
going to
which,
take.
too, like just what I'm saying on my side, with that increase, with the 10-year, I can easily see a lot of stagflation, in the near future that could last. And for those of you that don't know, stagflation is just like inflation, but with high rates, low unemployment, high inflationary period that lasts a long time. And it could really drain our society as a whole. And I just don't see how we're going to get around it. Obviously, again, just like you said, bad economic news, whether that's, some type of war or some type of, financial collapse definitely could happen. But for what I'm seeing, as we sit currently right here, my opinion, is I don't see rates coming down anytime soon, especially with what's happening with the Treasury. I could see inflation still holding strong with all that money that we injected, right? I could see that, people are going to experience a lot of pain for unemployment. The first thing to go is staff when you're talking about large corporations and they have to balance that book. The first thing to go is going to be employment, right? So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to watch no matter what. And it's just we haven't seen anything like this since the 1980s. But the big difference is that our affordability compared to the 1980s is so much higher.
Yeah.
So it's going to be odd to see how this kind of lines out.
Well,
So
you just hit the nail on the head, Nate. You know who controls this most is us,
mhm.
because home sellers today don't want to give up any of their equity. They have record equity. Okay, their homes went up by 50%, 60%, 70% in a time period. It literally happened in a matter of a few years. They were hoping for that to happen over their lifetime, and it happened in a few years. And now they have 3% interest rates, and they may want to sell. You talk to people, I talk to people every day who would love to sell their house. They
Yeah.
don't care that they have a 3% interest rate. They want to move on. They don't really love the idea of a 6 or 7, but at the end of the day, they have a tremendous amount of equity, right? But they're not willing to discount their house as much as they should. And so that's going to take some time.
Definitely. Daniel, I'm so happy you were able to hop on, bro. How you doing?
Good, man. But I'm just
Let me see
getting
that
everything set
beautiful
up.
face. Ah, there you go. Aw, big heart.
Good to see you, brother.
So, Aaron,
Good name.
Daniel Mahabir, he was the team leader for my last brokerage before I opened my own. Super solid guy, very knowledgeable on market trends, man, pays heavy attention to what's going on. He runs the market report for his brokerage as well as the monthly update for Southern Nevada real estate professionals. And me as an outside brokerage, obviously I was with you guys, Daniel, but just being able to come back, man, and hear what you guys are seeing is such an amazing insight, man. I sincerely appreciate you and thanks for taking the time to hop on. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
I think we just need to get you caught up. Me and Aaron were talking about the 10-year treasury. Obviously, it's shot through the roof. We're kind of going over kind of what we're seeing and possibly what to expect. Do you want to pipe in on the 10-year or anything else that you would like to share?
No, I'm sure you guys have already kind of covered some of the basics. Um, I'm interested in tracking a number like that because I think every day our consumers are, nervous about what's going on with mortgage rates, and little do they understand some of that correlation between the two. And so, you and I, first text this morning I sent out was, "Oh crap," right?
Yeah.
Once we saw what happened to the 10-year treasury. And
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
we're tracking that. I was reading some more articles. 10-year treasury is not the only thing that we need to be tracking right now.
Yeah.
Little did I know, China, alongside Japan and Canada, apparently they hold a lot of mortgage-backed security investment instruments, and so
They do,
that's the
but
next thing we're having to
China,
track.
but China as a whole, ever since we did the sanctions against Russia, China has been offloading those things hand over fist, which also throws a very big red flag. Uh, Disclaimer, I'm not a geopolitical, professional, you know what I'm saying? But seeing that, why would China be, worried about what we did with Russia in regards to tariffs and sanctions, right? For them to start offloading their treasury notes, in record numbers after seeing that, in my opinion, raises a big red flag. But what do I know? So
Yeah,
Well, Daniel, one of the things we talked about, is that it's important for homebuyers to have historical perspective, that the low rates that they're waiting for require a massive economic disastrous event. The threes, the twos and threes and fours came out of great recessions, pandemics, and the Federal Reserve buying mortgage-backed securities and quantitative easing for a period of 14 years. And outside
yeah,
of that 14 years, a 6 or 7% interest rate is not historically out of line.
yeah, completely normal.
correct.
But on the other side, right, of that is the fact that we are very high in price point. And the affordability index is just an absolute disaster. It is really expensive to live in America nowadays, right?
Yeah.
So Daniel, what are you seeing as far as price reductions, expired listings? What can you share on those details?
Yeah, both of those have been on the rise for quite a few months now. We're seeing almost double the price reductions on townhome and condo markets than we were a year ago, and a lot of that is because the people that are getting hit the most with this heightened interest rate market are those first-time home buyers. Aaron, you could probably pipe in on that, but whenever we're seeing affordability concerns, a lot of times the individuals that get hurt the most are the ones that are right at the first-time home buyer or lowest price points, and so they're getting strapped. So as a result, whereas we thought a townhome or condo listing could sell pretty quickly, that inventory is just not moving as fast as we used to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
seeing the same
and
thing on my
I
side.
think, and I think one of the things is, Daniel, is that I think there's over expectations for first time home buyers. They don't love the idea of condo townhouse, right? They want to get into a starter house. That's their goal. And we're having a strange conversation with people that I used to have offices in San Diego too, and in my offices in San Diego, which has been unaffordable for decades for first time home buyers. We used to have a conversation about you have to drive to affordability. You have to drive as far away from San Diego until homes become affordable. And that used to mean places like Murrieta and Temecula before they became unaffordable. Then it became Hemet and other areas. And really, I think it's the case in most markets, most big metros today, because there are a lot of pockets in the United States where homes are a starter home is still 300,000 or 350. And that may seem expensive in those areas versus where it was, 5, 6 years ago. But at the end of the day, it's affordable for most people. So, and the challenge becomes too is that remote work has kind of gone away. If remote work were still here, it may be an easier sell. But we have so many different factors working. Daniel and I were talking about how 2020 literally changed the world, changed the economic world, changed everything about the world. That all this historic data we have, and we were talking about how history repeats itself, but we've never had a period in our history where we paid people to stay home, where we paid businesses millions of dollars to shut their doors. So there's no historical data or perspective on that and coming out of that or having people work from home. So yeah, I think the first time home buyer is completely punished, but we are seeing, at least on my side of the business, the percentage of first time home buyers is as big as it's been in the last few years because they were so boxed out of the market. At least they have an opportunity today because there's inventory and there are sellers willing to negotiate. There's builders definitely willing to give tons of incentives. And so that opportunity is there.
Good, really good point right there too, because I feel in the resale market, and Dan, I know you can confirm this. Our biggest competition is new home builders. They are offering insane rates, and especially like I got a Sky Canyon listing, where I'm listing, and a lot of these developments are happening. Got another one over by the DR Horton, excuse me, that way. Over Northtown, North Las Vegas, right? And new home builders are just wiping the floor with us right now. It's because of those lower rates. And I think it's super important to mention that, right now, pricing correctly and curb appeal, condition, accessibility, things like that are more important than they've been in the last decade. We're not seeing, decreases or anything like that on my side. I run the data, we're seeing marginal median price increases, right? But the homes that are actually selling are the ones that are priced properly. They're in very good condition. The photos look amazing. They're marketed properly, and anything else seems to sit. And I don't think sellers are used to that, right? We've had a historic run as far as real estate goes.
Yeah, yeah. This is not the market where you could just say, you know what, I want to sell my house, and then within the next week you put it on the market. You got to take your time and get the condition as best as you can. Have a strategy around access, a marketing plan where it gets in front of as many eyes as possible, right? Because there's a very good chance that within a week of you putting your property up for sale, some other competitor is going to put their home up and quickly undercut you 5-10 grand, and that's how that race to the bottom and price reduction situation begins. So take your time with your listing, make sure it's really ready to rock and roll so that you could take advantage of the slimmed down buyer pool that's currently being paralyzed because of all of this analysis paralysis, right? All this uncertainty, all this volatility. You want the 1 or 2 active buyers for your home looking at your home, not the competitor's home, right? So the way I like to tell people is, listen, we could talk about a strategy for your home. The question is if this strategy is going to sell your home or your neighbor's property. Let's make sure it's selling yours.
Good point. Good point, man. I can't tell you how many times as a buyer's representative, I've actually gone to show something that is overpriced just to show these people that, hey, this thing is a good deal. They're realistic, right? This is the thing that you need to go for, not that shiny carrot over there that's a little bit overpriced, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
very
right.
good point.
Yeah.
I think in my neighborhood, I have a ton of people selling their houses, and they're not getting any looks, and they all ask me all the time, "Why is my house not selling?" And I said, "Your house is either priced to sell or priced to sit."
Mm-hmm.
And so, our neighbor sold their house for X, 2 years ago. Yeah, that was 2 years ago, right? And so, that is not the metrics. Your agent will tell you the metrics, and don't fight the agent. The agent will be truthful with you, right? The agent's going to be truthful. You may not like the truth, but the agent's going to be truthful with you on how long it'll take to sell your house if priced right. Even if
Aaron, you bring up such a good point where I don't know if the agent will be truthful. When you talk about what's going on in our industry where there aren't as many closings happening, and in fact, Nathan, you've talked about the statistic a lot. Almost 3/4 of real estate agents didn't even close a deal last year.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of agents out there, and as sellers, you got to be wary of this. a lot of agents are hurting financially and will take an overpriced listing just so they can have themselves to market. And they're not advising the sellers on how to actually sell their home. They're not actually having the consultation about pricing, and they're not willing to say maybe what the seller needs to hear. They're just feeding what they want to hear so they can take a listing. I think as a seller, you got to be very careful and make sure you're interviewing the right agent in today's market.
It might not just be, that they're refusing to share that data. It also might be the fact that they're uneducated too. We've been going through a lot of wild shifts in the market. I mean, it has been very volatile. We're technically in a seller's market, but let's be real here. Buyers have a lot more options compared to last year. Our year over year, our inventory has skyrocketed, especially in the condo townhome market. So it's either, purposely, leading somebody to get a sign in the ground, or it's a lack of education. And I think that the agent that isn't paying attention to current market trends and enveloping this is going to be doing themselves a very big disservice. We're in a fast-paced environment. There's a lot of moving parts. We've never seen this in our generation, Aaron, your generation, none of that. So if you're not paying attention, you're going to get left behind. Especially dealing with Clear Cooperation, right? We've got Rocket that is making some big moves. We've got Zillow that is competing that big acquisition as far as Clear Cooperation goes. And all of us as licensed real estate professionals are just kind of lost here in the middle, saying, hey, what do we do? So Dan, good question for you. Obviously, there's lots of acquisitions going on right now. If you were to say something to a new agent, what would you say?
One, you need to align yourself with a broker or company that is staying on top of the environment that we're working in this industry. Number one, it's highly litigious. There's a lot of lawsuits going on. A lot of indie brokerages are finding themselves having to fold in because of either settlement issues, or it just takes one E&O claim for them to see, oh crap, I'm now in a financial situation where I need to fold into a bigger company and be better protected. The point of me saying that is because a lot of brokers or brokerages, if they are too worried about their financial stability, they're not staying on top of the things going on. Just yesterday, Zillow made an announcement that's very, very big for home sellers to know about. And not a lot of people are talking about that. And I guarantee you 90% of real estate agents don't even know what I'm referring to. So the first thing is, if you don't, your time should be spent lead generating your ass off right now. Get into lead generation, get into follow-up, and take care of your relationships. And if there's a training that's going on with your broker that's helping you stay on top of everything going on, it's almost like once a week there's an industry shifting piece of news. Get plugged in, download the information, share it with your database, and then get back to lead gen and follow-up. Because that's going to be the best medicine no matter what. I don't care what goes on with the 10-year treasury. I don't care what goes on with CCP. I don't care what goes on with Zillow, Redfin being bought, Keller Williams doing their thing, indie brokerages having it does, all that stuff matters, but what magnifies the pressure of that is if you're not lead generating and following up with the database. If you have a constant flow of people that you're taking care of, those kind of things, yes, it might paralyze half of your individuals, but you constantly bring in a flow through lead generation.
For sure. I'm a big proponent that the only reason why consumers trust Zillow is because their real estate agent refused to reach out to them. And that is it, We're local market experts. For the love of God, lean on the people you know and trust, right? Aaron, as far as like mortgage rates go, what you're seeing in the market, what do you think we could possibly expect over the next year? Obviously subject to change. There's a lot of volatility going on right now, but just from the outside looking in, what do you think we can expect?
I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less than 6.25 on a rate sheet anytime in the next 12 months. Maybe as high as 7.25, 7.5. So that kind of range. Right. So, like I said, the main thing is if you're a home buyer, look at the data, look at the wealth data, the homeowner data versus renter data. You got to get on the ladder, right? You got to get on the ladder. And so you got to find when you can afford to buy a house, you buy a house, and you're emotionally ready to buy a house, you buy a house. And interest rate's not going to be, you're not going to love it. But the good news is at some point, and it may be way down the road, you should be able to get an opportunity to refinance, right? To lower the rate. It may not happen, but it could happen. So that's why you get into as much as you can afford now and make it comfortable for you. But if you're holding out waiting for a rate in the fives, or less than 5, I think you're crazy.
Yeah.
If you're holding out for a rate in the 5s, you may get an opportunity, but only, like I said, if we hit a major economic storm. So we'd have to go into recession. Recession would potentially drive. Now, not all recessions do drive rates down like that either. So it's not even a guarantee. So even if you're listening to this and you say, well, I 100% believe we're heading for recession, so I'm going to wait for rates to drop. It doesn't always happen that way. Right.
Two of the last 5 recessions dropped real estate rates. The other ones actually had very mild, meager increases, right? And I'm a big proponent of time in the market beats timing the market any day, right? We have a good saying in real estate as well, is don't wait to buy real estate, buy real estate and wait. If you look at the chart, over the last 70 years, we've had very little years that actually equate to a decrease. So as long as, good point for you, Aaron, emotionally ready, right? Because this is an emotional decision. For most people, this is the biggest purchase that they'll ever have in their life. As long as you're emotionally ready and you've balanced your budget and you're financially ready, for the love of God, hop in, work with a professional. There's lots of options out there, from 0 down to rate buy downs, all kinds of fun stuff. You need to leverage people like us, and see what's going to be best for you. Because I know for a fact, Aaron and Daniel, I'm of the same mindset. I'm never going to tell you what to do. I'm going to bring you the facts. I'm going to bring you the data. And at the end of the day, it's up to you to make your decision. And that's it.
And it's important to know, last year was the worst year in real estate in 30 years.
Yeah.
Home prices went up 3%.
Exactly. Worst year in real estate in 40 years. And we just recently had the biggest uptick in the 30-year conventional mortgage since 1980s, right? Like, that is huge news. If you're not paying attention to that, I don't know what to tell you,
So if you're waiting for home prices to drop, I wouldn't wait for markets to drop. Home sellers, you got to get to the individual seller who's willing to drop their price, right? And so you got to be patient, especially in a market like Las Vegas, where there's still a lot of people moving there every month, and Las Vegas is landlocked. There's not a lot of land. It's all owned by the government. So it's very challenging. Homes can sit on the market a long time, but you got to find the right seller. You got to find the right property. You got to be patient. And, if you need a certain price, just get with a great agent like Nate and just keep making offers. Get with an agent who's okay to make those offers.
Definitely. See what's going to stick. But Dan, on your point too, I don't know what you guys are seeing on your side. I don't have a lot of sellers that are willing to drop. They are holding very firm. And I know it's due to that poison pill, right? We've got 60% of mortgages out there right now. If they're not owned cash, 60% of them are under 4%. That is a really hard thing to give up.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So, there's a couple of points you guys bring up. Number one, if there is somebody from the general public that's waiting for prices to drop, to empathize with them, I think that I understand why, right? They're just looking to get a good deal. They've seen great deals happen in the past when markets had very shaky things going on financially. I think what you have to wrap your head around is, we're in a position where if you wanted prices to drop as precipitously as they've done in the past, you're either banking on a ton of inventory flooding the market. We've doubled our inventory in the last year, and we're still not seeing prices drop. We're seeing them
pre-pandemic levels, though.
Right?
I mean, this is a normal market, right?
Yeah. And builders are not going to be building. The last time they were building at those types of levels was back during the great. Aaron, you put a great video together. That they have not built even half at the level that they used to. Because they were caught with their, if I could say, pants down. And so they wouldn't go back to those levels again. So we don't see an easy solution for a ton of inventory hitting the market. Homeowners, they're locked into 2-3% because Aaron was handing them out like, Halloween candy during COVID. And so you don't have that situation. You would need to see buyers completely leave the market. And we're not seeing that either. There's still a steady stream of people that want to buy, especially in a market like this.
If anything, so I've been doing a lot of micro economics, comparatively year over year. So what I've been doing is totaling quarterly totals for specific markets, say Painted Desert or Sun City Summerlin. And what I'm seeing is, yes, inventory's picked up, but homes are actually selling faster right now. I'm still compiling a lot of data on decreases, but all in all, I could see that we have a very stale year. I don't see a big drop happening unless we have some kind of crazy news like, World War III or, some kind of financial collapse.
Yeah, this is not to tell somebody, if you're waiting for prices to drop, stop doing that and get into the market now. I'm just telling you there might be more information that's missing. And what I've seen, especially since I've entered the industry, like you, Nate, is people will tell me they'll wait a year later and prices went up 4, 5, 10%, right? And so that the waiting game, it just doesn't typically work out when you're playing that in the real estate world.
Buy real
There-
estate and wait.
there-
Exactly. You know,
there's
so not only you're missing out on the equitable gains, but you're also missing out on the tax advantage as well, right? So me as an advisor, a financial advisor, I don't want you to pay any more to Uncle Sam than you absolutely positively have to. And real estate has some of the best tax advantages that you can think of when it comes to asset selection. So, again, work with your professional and see what's best for you. Aaron,
you
go ahead,
know,
pipe in. Sorry, I interrupted.
guys, there's an old saying: the best time to buy real estate was 5 years ago. There's no way to predict it.
Yeah, without a doubt.
It's always 5 years ago. I should have done this. I should have done that. So not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I'm working on a pre-approval right now with a guy who's lived in Las Vegas for 40 years. He has rented for 40 years. He's never bought his house. He's rented homes as high as $19,000 a month. The guy makes over $1 million a year, and he's been a renter. And all he kept talking to me about was, I should have bought in 1999. I should have bought in 2004. I should have bought. And even now, as we're trying to get him pre-approved, he's struggling to make this decision to go forward. You just got to get out of the mindset. I mean, think about the millions and millions of dollars this dude has lost by not pulling the trigger. Every market. So look, every market to him was not the right time, because when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't feel like at the right time. It never does. So that's why, getting back to it, Nate, when it's affordable, when you're emotionally ready, you do it.
Great advice right there. Love it, man. If you're in it to win it,